Hello, it's Amy, and I'm back again with the Journal of Emily Shore. And let's just make sure we're set up here correctly. Just realized the microphone was way down on the floor, which is not what we want. But back again with the Journal of Emily Shore, beginning with the entry for February the 1st of 1839. We had not quite finished butter making when Mr. Charles Park called. He is a lad of 15 in very melancholy circumstances, and particularly recommended to our attention by the Ducksworths. His brothers and sisters have been dropping off in consumption one after another. He himself anticipates the same fate. His father is dead, and his mother, who is in very narrow circumstances, is only just able to send him out to Madeira, where he is all alone, in delicate health and suffering great depression of spirits. We, in consequence, feel much interested in him and wish to show him every kindness in our power. He is a shy, modest boy, very gentle in his manners, and looks pale and sickly. He, however, tells us that he is much better since he has been in Madeira, and has escaped his usual spring cough. February 2nd, Saturday. Such a housekeeper am I become that I was employed all morning in reboiling some English preserves, while Papa and Mamma were paying visits and otherwise engaged. The Stoddarts and Dr. Alexander Brown called before dinner, and afterwards Mrs. Burnett and Mr. Houghton. Mr. H. talks of going back to America for a year or two. He expatriated to me as usual on his sanguine disposition. Or rather, he expatiated, rather than expatriated. He expatiated on his sanguine disposition, his fatalism, and his happy life, and assured me that it was very foolish to marry. February 7th, Thursday. We had invited young Charles Park to join our early dinner, meaning to make him at home with us. And he came, but unluckily a long succession of visitors beset us, as usual, half the day. A loud firing in the town, from the Loo Rock apparently, now attracted our attention. We all rushed up into the turret, but could see nothing, and then everybody went to the esplanade to discover the cause. It was supposed that a ship which sailed today had neglected to clear the custom house. And so I wonder what that means. Did the custom house fire a round off as a warning to the ship to come to the customs house, or was it the ship that rammed into the side of the customs house? Is that what they mean by failing to clear it? I'm not sure, and there doesn't seem to be any further explanation there. February 9th, Saturday. There is a great courtesy in the lower order of Portuguese, even to each other, and they never meet without taking off their carapuças, and I never hear them address each other in rough, rude language. They generally uncover to the English, and I always receive bows in my rides beyond the town. February 10, Sunday. Our room is always supplied with flowers, thanks to our friends. It took me some time to arrange them all this morning, for they filled 7 glasses and jars, and I counted no less than 33 different species. Everybody went to church, and I was left alone. I cannot describe the sadness and depression under which I suffered all the morning. I felt quite sick at heart, and languor of body added to the dejection of my mind. A gloomy hue seemed to tinge everything in this world. I thought it impossible I should ever be happy. I saw nothing for me to enjoy either in the present or future. I felt that I could willingly die, and almost wished that this long illness might indeed soon terminate in my release from earth. And yet, when evening came and I was again in the midst of our family circle, this feeling of melancholy left me, and I was surprised to find myself reconciled to it. February 11th, Monday. I ended my ride, as on Friday, at the Freemans. They overtook me as I was going there, having just been at our house. I went in with them. Mr. Freeman stayed a few minutes only. And then I had a delightful hour with my favorite Miss F., who looked lovelier than ever today, and was so warm and affectionate in her manner to me that I felt my heart open to her still more. Our conversation, as usual, turned presently to religious topics. Miss Freeman began by referring to the subject of learning by heart parts of Scripture, which we had before talked about, and she proposed that we should each set about learning the same portion. We chose peas, and I'm not even going to attempt to figure out what this Roman numeral is, but it's a very long one, and chapters 13 and 14 of St. John. We then conversed about various portions of the Bible, which led us to speak of studying the original languages and other topics. I regret so much now, said Miss Freeman, that at one time I thought I ought to read no books but religious books, or at least to take a strong interest in nothing but religion. So when I was reading Roland, as soon as I became interested in it, I shut up the book and did not take it up till an hour or two. And then, if I felt the interest return, I went to practice. But do not you think that it was a mistake? I said. A mistake? Oh, a very great one, she answered. I think, added I, that it must be our duty to cultivate our intellects, as they are given to us. I thought so too, but that it was to be only a duty, not an enjoyment or a pleasure, replied Miss Freeman. And how long did you go on with this way of thinking? About 2 years, she said, and then my illness came. She paused a little and then gave me a very interesting account of herself. She had always, she said, been considered an amiable child, and was attentive to her outward religious duties, but was not more than this, till suddenly the sense of her sinfulness and neglect of heavenly things burst upon her in an overwhelming manner, and she became completely miserable. I got hold of Doddridge, she said. Do you know it? I assented, and she went on. It is a very discouraging book, and I read it incessantly. I was always sent to bed at a certain time, and after my governess had come to see that I was on the point of going to bed, I used to sit up for a long time reading and reading, till I became so puzzled and perplexed that I burst into floods of tears and could read no more. And then I went to bed completely wretched, and woke next morning in the same state. I thought I should never be a Christian, that it was impossible I ever could be. But had you no one, I asked, to talk to? No, no one, she said. Mamma was always extremely kind, but she never talked to us about religion. She was a religious person herself, and she used to hear us our catechism, and made us go to church regularly, and gave us religious storybooks to read. But she never talked to us on the subject, for fear of teaching us to talk what we did not feel, to become hypocritical. So, though she was as kind as possible, and I loved her devotedly, I could not talk to her about this, and I was, besides, very reserved. I could not have said what I felt to anyone. Do you know what kind of reserve? Oh, yes, indeed I do, I said, and I felt it almost as strongly as you did. It is much to be regretted, she continued. One loses a great deal. After a short digression, she continued her narrative. She remained for some time in this distressing state, and got entangled in all sorts of intricacies and perplexities and errors, till her long illness came, which she considers all the greatest mercy to her. She said that when she was ill, she had a great longing to live, chiefly on account of her younger brother and sister, to whom she was afraid she had given a wrong impression of religion, for they had begun to complain how melancholy she had grown, and had attributed it all to religion. And I am so thankful, she added, that I have been allowed to live to efface this impression, as I trust I have. After this, too, came all her troubles and sorrows, for which she was now prepared, by having thus obtained peace of mind. She said one great reason why she no longer longed to recover from her illness was the thought that she had taken no interest in the spiritual welfare, or rather why she longed to recover from her illness, was the thought that she had taken no interest in the spiritual welfare of others. All her religion had been for herself alone, and she had made no effort to assist anyone else, which thought was to her insupportable, and she made up for her neglect as soon as she began to recover. February 14th, Thursday. Mr. Ware called this afternoon to talk to Papa about the lecture which is to be delivered tonight. And we have a editor's note here. A course of scientific lectures for the benefit of young men, resident and visitors, had been proposed, and E.'s father was asked to deliver the introductory lecture. They had an interesting conversation. Mr. W. seemed a good and intelligent man. He is excessively tall, has a high forehead and little sparkling eyes. He speaks without opening his mouth and laughs on one side of it. His favorite phrase is approbation. His favorite phrase of approbation is "just so," and he has an odd way of mixing up his sentences with a when he neither asks a question nor expects an answer. I suspect he is too sanguine about the success of these lectures. Dr. Nichol is to lecture on astronomy, Dr. B on electricity. Mr. Lowe is a very well-informed man and conversant with botany and geology, but he refuses to take any part in the business, partly because his time is fully occupied, partly because he says the researches of science tend to produce skepticism, instancing Laplace and others. On coming in, everybody but myself prepared to go to the lecture which Papa was to deliver. They set off about 7:30, and I amused myself meanwhile with Lockhart Scott and my journal. In little more than an hour they returned together with Mr. W. and Mr. N., who took tea with us all in high spirits. The lecture had met with complete success. I never felt prouder of my father. It seems that the room was crowded, and many were unable to get admittance. The audience listened with profound attention and great interest, and at the end gave a tremendous clapping. Applauses, too, of the lecture and its delivery were heard on every side, and many persons came up to Mamma to express their high gratification. Everybody agrees that it was a beautiful lecture and admirably delivered. Mr. Ware sat next to me, and we fell into conversation about Cintra, scenery, astronomy, and the two interesting volumes of Professor Nichols. While we were talking, Mrs. Phelps called to us from the window of their house to say that we could not sleep that night till they knew from what poem Papa had quoted the lines with which he concluded his lecture. So should an idiot, where at large he strays, find the sweet lyre on which an artist plays, with rash and awkward force the chords he shakes, and grins with wonder at the noise he makes. But should a wise and well-instructed hand first take the shell beneath his just command, in gentle strains it seems as it complained of the rude injuries it late sustained, till tuned at length to some immortal song, it sounds Jehovah's name and pours his praise along. Cowpen's Truth. After our visitors were gone, we continued, sitting up till very late, talking over the circumstances of the lecture, and indeed, I was so happy that I could not sleep till almost 2:00. And we'll leave it at that for today, as we're at the 12.5-minute mark. When we come back tomorrow, we will read the entry for February the 16th, 1839.